Why Bangladesh wants the Rohingyas to return? Why is India still stuck about it? What are the options that are remaining with India? And what is the actual story of Rohingya crisis? Imagine having no country, no citizenship, and no home to return to. That's the reality of Rohingyas, the world's most persecuted community. And this is where Bangladesh's impatience, Myanmar's denial, and India's silence comes up. Hello everyone, welcome to Vajiram and Ravi's Flash News. My name is Shubhangi Singh, and today we are going to understand the depth of Rohingya crisis, where Bangladesh is getting impatient to send them back, but India still holds silence only, and Myanmar is denying as always. So let us understand first of all who are exactly Rohingyas. So Rohingyas are ethnic Muslim minority from the Rakhine state of Myanmar. So if you see on this particular map, you will be able to see this region which is marked in yellow and orange. So this shows the major ethnic groups which are present in Myanmar. One of them being Rohingyas, as they are not recognized as the citizens of Myanmar and they are excluded from the citizenship, and especially after the 2017 military crackdown that happened in their own country on them, they fled to multiple places, mostly Bangladesh, India, and we also see some movement towards other countries. When we talk about this community, we have to understand that it has been decades of persecution, military violence, and denial of rights that has caused this exodus. To explain you the extent of exodus, we get to see more than 7 lakh Rohingyas who fled to only Bangladesh. You can imagine the number that is present in our country and other countries. And as of now, the world's largest refugee camp is of Rohingyas that lies in Cox's Bazar, that is in Bangladesh. Now let us understand that how did this problem start with. So if we talk about 1982, Myanmar stripped Rohingya, this particular community, of the citizenship, and almost 40 years later, there had been constant conflict between the Rohingyas and other communities, but it was in 2012 that communal riots between Buddhists and Muslims break out. After that, with gradual passage of year, there was a lot of military usage on Rohingyas, and in 2017 came the major military offensive where we saw fleeing of Rohingyas from their own country. After that, there have been many attempts, especially by Bangladesh, to repatriate the all refugees which are present there, and as of now in 2025, Bangladesh is asking for voluntary repatriation. That means if any refugee is ready to go back to Myanmar, they are ready to facilitate it, and as of now none have signed for the same. Now let us understand that why Bangladesh is pushing refugees back to Myanmar where they are not recognized, where they are not given the citizenship, and they are in danger of their life. So when we talk about Bangladesh, the reasons are very similar to India, but Bangladesh's capacity is very much limited as compared to India. In this situation, there is extreme economic and resource pressure because as of now it is hosting more than 1 million refugees. It has the world's largest refugee settlement. It has a fiscal burden on the government, limited fiscal space, there is extreme donor fatigue, aid cuts are present, and you have to remember that recently only Bangladesh has gone through a chaotic time in itself, where students came to the roads and ousted the then Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. As of now, it is under interim chief advisor Muhammad Yunus, and that is why one of the reasons we get to understand that there is limited economic and resource pressure, which automatically leads to social and security concerns, drug trafficking, illegal trade, radicalization, fear in camps. There is extreme strain which is present in local population, And government also fears that these refugees will permanently settle in these communities, which might lead to instability, changes in demographics, which can be costly. And then comes the diplomatic factor, where Dhaka really wants to normalize what ties it has with Myanmar. So that is why they are using this voluntary repatriation to push for international accountability, and they are trying to balance their ties with China, India, ASEAN using this particular refugee issue at the international forums. But whatever Bangladesh is trying, especially in terms of repatriation, it is not working because of multiple reasons. One of the primary being Myanmar is not ready to accept Rohingyas and grant citizenship to them. Furthermore, these people, these refugees, they are already in fear of persecution, torture, and they would be rendered stateless upon return. Furthermore, there is a clear lack of trust which we see, where repatriation is seen as forced, even though here it is a voluntary proposition. And UNHCR has a clear stance that whenever any country is talking about repatriation, it should be safe, it should be dignified and voluntary. And as of now, none of these options seem to be on table. So that is why in 2019, 23 and now again, repatriation convoys have been arranged, but no refugee has voluntarily signed up for it. But now the actual question comes, what about India? Where is India positioned in this particular refugee crisis? So first of all, let us understand that what are India's legal as well as policy position when we are talking about tackling Rohingyas refugees. So we'll go by the case Mohammed Salimullah versus Union of India. So basically this petition was filed by Rohingya refugees against deportation because they were being deported back to Myanmar. And in this particular case, they cited Article 14, that is right to equality, and also Article 21, that is right to life. So in this judgment, Supreme Court went ahead and clarified that right not to be deported, which is present in Article 19, 1E, it is only for the citizens, not for the non-citizens. Furthermore, in this situation, India is not bound. Another important point is 1951 Refugee Convention. India is not bound by it. It is not a signatory to it. And third, deportation can be allowed. Supreme Court went ahead and said that, but there has to be a proper procedure which needs to be established by law. And because of this, as of Rohingyas, they do not even have the refugee status in our country. They have the status of illegal migrants. And when we talk about the number, as of now, this number goes beyond 1 lakh migrants. Different sources tell us different numbers, but recent numbers from the government data quotes 83,000 illegal migrants. But why India is silent upon this? India is silent because it is caught up in a conundrum where it is stuck between the humanitarian concerns and the security and other dimensions. So when we talk about the humanitarian concerns, they do have to maintain the image of a regional leader and how they have propagated that they are humanitarian democracy. In this situation, if they deport these migrants back to a place where they are threatened for life, it does not go with this particular image. Historically, India has been a place for refugees. It has given refuge to Tibetans, Sri Lankans, Tamils, Afghans. Now, denying it to a specific community turns the conversation in a different direction. And most importantly, there are criticisms for violating non-refoulement. We will be talking about non-refoulement in detail. Now, when we talk about the security and strategic concerns, that is where the dilemma is. Either we can tackle this or we can tackle this, because this population leads to the fear of radicalization and also illegal migration. Furthermore, another huge problem at India's end that we have no national refugee law, and we also have to maintain our strategic ties with Myanmar and also Bangladesh in this scenario, where it is very much strained with Bangladesh as of now. Now moving to non-refoulement, as I said, we will be discussing in detail. When we talk about non-refoulement, principle of non-refoulement, it basically means that no refugee should be sent back to a country where he has to face threats to life or even threats to freedom. Now this principle is part of customary international law. It is binding even on the countries who are not the signatory. But India has had a very clear stance to this principle of non-refoulement. That is, it is not legally bounding, but the problem is our courts have invoked it in various matters. For example, Qatar Abbas versus Union of India in 1999. So here, many analysts, scholars have remarked that India has a very narrow interpretation in this situation, and this is what is going to undermine our constitutional morality. It calls for a wider discussion, better policy making, and also better engagement with Myanmar and Bangladesh. Now let us understand that what it leads to in terms of challenges. When we are talking about having illegal migrants in the country, it poses a situation where the host country has to bear the economic burden. Resource depletion, security tension, donor fatigue. There is a concern of human rights versus national security. That means we have to balance the sovereignty with humanitarian obligation. And a difficult factor here is that Myanmar is still reluctant. There is no citizenship pathway which is available to Rohingyas. They are viewed as foreigners in their own country, and that is why we get to see the regional spillover. This migration tensions are present in our northeast India. They are plaguing other countries which are around, and there are risks of radicalization, human trafficking and others as well. Now let us understand what are the implications for India. When we are talking about constitutional implications, we have to understand that there is a direct debate between fundamental rights for non-citizens, and this stands in front of the national security. And the second is, it raises the questions on Article 21's universality. Then we have to understand the implications in terms of foreign policy, because India must avoid alienating Bangladesh because it has solid ties with Myanmar and it can address this situation. It is in the position to address it with Myanmar, but it cannot alienate Bangladesh in this process. And it has huge implication on domestic politics because Rohingyas are used in the polarization narratives, especially during the elections. States like Jammu, Haryana, Delhi, they host small clusters where these communities are kept under police watch because of the security concerns. Now, it is important that this situation is addressed, and it is important that both of the countries, Bangladesh as well as India, take some imminent steps so as to address this situation. For example, Bangladesh can pursue repatriation, but it should be done under international monitoring and voluntary consent. Continue lobbying for global funding so that the donor fatigue issue that is addressed and there is better responsibility sharing. And for India, we have to start with a national refugee law where the refugees have a right, status and deportation norms, so that the distinction that is being brought in, that the other refugees are getting the rights but Rohingyas are being alienated and religion is most of the time brought in the conversation, that needs to be addressed. And also align the deportation policy especially with Article 21 and customary international law so that we match the global norms. Now that was all from my side. If you have any questions, you can put it down in the comment section. Thank you so much.